F39 Pictures presents The Sleeping Cetra Audiobook. Chapter 4, Sweet Song.
Cloud groaned as he slipped off his chocobo, his body still sore from the fall. After he dragged his body back to Choco, the captain of the guard, Vincent Valentine, found him. His long black hair was loose under the red band he wore. His red cloak concealed his black clothing, his weapon, and his golden-clawed arm. Vincent was a very intimidating man, to say the least. He stood at a commanding 6 foot, towering over the younger prince. Vincent never expressed emotions on his face, but Cloud could see the fury in his blood-red eyes. He was sure the captain was not pleased to find him in such a sorry state. After all, if anything happened to the younger prince, the queen would blame Vincent.
"I'm surprised you survived a fall like that,"
Vincent quietly said as he got off his own black chocobo. Cloud patted Choco, who gave a small squawk while eyeing Vincent carefully. He thought back to his fall. Anything on the hill he slammed into, rocks, trees, roots, and bushes. It tore him up badly, too. He could feel the sharp rocks slicing through his skin. How could he have survived? He did not even have a healing material with him. Thinking back, it had to be that girl. That mysterious girl with a voice so pure and beautiful, it entranced him. Just then, he felt a cold hand clamp against his shoulder. Looking up, Cloud saw Vincent's metal claw hand on his shoulder. His red eyes glared into Cloud's blue ones with annoyance.
"Are you listening? Your mother wants a word with you."
Figures.
He expected this. Every time he ran away, he would get a lecture from his mother. She would scold him like there was no tomorrow. Yet, Cloud was used to it, and it never mattered to him. He sat out to meet his mother in the throne room where she was pacing back and forth. Her scepter was grasped tightly in her hand, her knuckles turning white. When Cloud entered, she looked up at the door, her eyes narrowing at him. She walked toward him with every intention of yelling at him. They met halfway, and Cloud waited for her to explode. Behind his mother, he saw her advisors. Off to the side, his brothers sat on the steps leading up to the throne. Zack loved seeing Cloud get scolded because it was amusing to him. Queen Strife glared at her son with such fury and brought her hand down as if to slap him. Cloud did not flinch because he knew his mother would never hit him, even if she was angry with him.
"How dare you run off? You run off and could have possibly been hurt by a wild animal. You miss your studies, not to mention tearing up your clothing. You leave without any indication of where you can be found. You make me worry half to death. And for what? So you can have fun riding that filthy bird and fighting fiends? I may have every intention of taking your chocobo away from you and grounding you in the castle."
Is that all?
"Cloud Strife, you will take your duty seriously. It is time for you to grow up and stop with your childish fantasies. You have a duty to your crown, and soon you will rule your own kingdom."
Maybe I don't want to rule my own kingdom. I want a life that's mine.
Silence. Zack, take your brother to his room and keep an eye on him. I have no time for this. We will continue this later, Cloud.
Zack left his spot and walked over to his mother and Cloud. He placed his hand on his mother's shoulder to comfort her. She smiled gratefully at him and then walked back to her throne. Zack took his younger brother by the arm and dragged him toward his chambers. When they were in the hallway, Cloud yanked his arm free, glaring at Zack.
"You really got Mom ticked off this time. I'm surprised she didn't hit you. Not to mention you look like a mess. What the hell happened to you?"
The younger prince, however, was not listening to a word his brother was saying. Instead, his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about that girl. He wondered who she was and why she was sitting in the middle of a forest all alone. Well, she was not all alone. She had those animals with her. That red one looked as if he would have taken his arm off had he tried to pursue the girl.
"Hello, Planet to Cloud."
Waving his hand in front of his brother's face, Cloud blinked, looking back at his brother and noticing they were at his room. Cloud ran his hand through his locks and opened his bedroom door. He muttered a goodbye to his brother and walked in, closing the door behind him. Cloud's room looked very luxurious. He had a gigantic bed to himself with fine bedding. He had a large plush rug at the end of the bed. A warm fireplace sat opposite of his bed, and a balcony window opposite of his door. He had a circular table with plates of fruit for him to enjoy, as well as a dresser filled with clothing. Tapestries, candles, and other decor filled his room. However, Cloud never really cared. He stripped out of his torn shirt and his shoulder guard. He tossed him to the floor carelessly and plopped down on his bed. He needed a bath to soothe his sore muscles. That fall really knocked him around. Yet, he did survive with only soreness. It was that girl. She had to be the one who healed him. He reached into his pocket and retrieved the pink ribbon and white materia that he pulled off the girl accidentally. He stared at the ribbon that held her beautiful shiny brown locks in that thick braid. She looked like a peasant, but this material was fine silk. This must have been the only thing she ever had that was made of silk. Cloud placed the ribbon down and looked at the materia. It was pure white. He never seen a materia like this before, and it did not seem to do anything. He placed it with it between his fingers, wondering what the small materia was used for. In any case, he had to return it. That girl was probably looking for it right now. He never would have taken the ribbon and materia if she did not get scared. He had to return it to her soon, maybe tomorrow. There was only one problem. How would he get past her animals without having them tearing him apart? Looking at the materia, an idea began to form in his mind. He placed the white materia on his bed next to the ribbon and walked over to a large chest in the corner of his room. He kicked it open and looked inside to see hundreds of glowing orbs. He rummaged through the materia until he found one he was looking for. A small smile crept onto his lips. Aerith woke up early the following morning. She washed and dressed quickly so she could find her lost ribbon and materia. As she put on her boots, she noticed that neither her aunts or uncle were awake. She could not leave without them knowing where she was going. After all, they went crazy when she used to hide from them when she was little. She grabbed a writing utensil and scribbled down a note quickly. Last night when she returned home, she did not tell her aunts or uncle that she lost her ribbon and materia. After all, she did not want to explain what happened since she was not a particularly good liar. If the three found out she saw a stranger, they would lock her in her room and never let her out again. That was the last thing she needed. Finishing her note, Aerith left the house, closing the door behind her. She met up with Red 13, a caged Sith, halfway toward the river where she assumed she lost it. They headed over and instantly Aerith was looking for it. She ran up and down the area, searching every corner.
Aerith, caged Sith and I looked here last night and could not find a thing.
I had to have lost it here because my head came undone, but I didn't think I lost the ribbon.
But Aerith, what if it got washed away by the rain?
Then I'll go all the way down by the river. No matter how far, I have to find it. I just have to.
The group searched the area until almost noon. Aerith slumped down by the river, dirt covering her hands and knees. She felt as if she was about to cry. How could she lose her mother's gifts? She felt so irresponsible. Red 13, a caged Sith, rested a little ways from her, tired of looking as well. Aerith dipped her hands into the water and cringed. It was still cold, and it felt like needles prickling her skin. She sucked it up and washed her hands and knees clean.
Aerith, will you sing for us again?
I don't feel much like singing.
But you never finished the song from yesterday. It was a new one, I know it was. It might make you feel better. Afterward we can look again. We need to rest anyway, we might get too tired and pass out.
Aerith looked at caged Sith and could not help but smile. He was a persistent cat. Her friends loved hearing her gentle voice soothe them. She sighed and gave in. She closed her eyes, thinking of the song she sang yesterday, and continued where she left off. Not too far from Aerith, Prince Cloud was riding his chocobo in breakneck speed. He was not exactly sure of the spot where he saw her, and he was worried she would not be there. Yet, when the wind brought him her beautiful voice, he knew he would find her. This time, he stayed on Choco, heading toward the angelic voice.
So far and away, see the bird as it flies by, gliding through the shadows of the clouds up in the sky.
He urged Choco to hurry, needing to find her. This girl captivated him so much with the song. Who could this peasant girl be? He needed to know her, or at least return her things to her. After all, she did save him, and thanking her would be the nice thing to do as well.
I've laid my memories and dreams upon those wings. Leave them now and see what tomorrow brings.
Wait. Stop, Choco.
Pulling gently on his reins, Choco stopped and made a noise. Cloud hushed him, though, listening to her voice. He looked around, peering through the dense forest, until he saw her, sitting by the river. She was dipping her hands into the cold water, washing them. Cloud smiled, glad to have finally found her. He slid off Choco and began to approach the girl, when he saw her animal friends nearby. Cloud watched them as he listened to her sing, yet he was unsure they would notice him. He held his breath, and when neither of the animals looked at him, he pulled out the materia he brought with him. He never really used a pale yellow materia before until now. He held it in his palm and it began to glow. He aimed the magic at the animals. A yellow mist showered over them. Red 13 let out a yawn, his eyes growing heavy. Cait Sith was trying his best to stay in balance on his Moogle. However, his body was growing heavy. Red 13, Cait Sith, and his Moogle slumped forward, falling asleep. Cloud grinned and pocketed his materia, thankful that it worked. Choco nudged him gently, and Cloud grinned back at the bird.
In your dearest memories, do you remember loving me? Was it fate that brought us close and now leaves me behind?
When Aerith sang that verse, Cloud's head snapped toward her. She still did not notice him. He came out of the forest and headed toward her. He noticed the young girl was sitting barefoot on the ground, watching her legs from crawling in the dirt. As she finished the last line of the verse, she looked down at the water at her reflection. She scooped up some more water, gently washing her cheeks.
A voice from the past, joining yours and mine, adding up the layers of harmony, and so it goes on and on.
When the ripples in the water stopped and Aerith could see her reflection again, she could see Cloud's reflection.
Melodies of life to the sky beyond the flying birds, forever and beyond.
Cloud finished, remembering the song. Aerith scrambled to her feet and looked at Cloud in shock, just as she did yesterday. Cloud smiled gently, but all Aerith could think of doing was run. She slipped past Cloud in a flash and rushed over to her friends for help. When she noticed, they were sound asleep. Aerith began tugging on Red 13 to get him to wake up, but it was useless. She looked back to see Cloud coming after her, trying to say something, but the young girl did not give him time. She headed for the water, where several large rocks poked out so she could pass over without falling into the cold water. Aerith jumped to the first and skipped to the second.
Wait!
Aerith turned around, but instead of stopping, she continued to hop across the stones. Cloud followed her, stepping into the water with his boots, not caring at all about the water. As Aerith neared the opposite bank, she went to jump to another rock. As she landed with her bare feet on the slippery stone, she felt her feet slide from under her. But found herself not in the cold water, but in the safe warm arms of the mysterious man. Cloud held her by the waist before he picked her up bridal style. Aerith clasped onto him out of fear around the neck as he took her back to the other side, setting her gently on her feet. His hand held her by the waist.
Are you okay?
His blue eyes seeing her emerald ones. Aerith opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Ever since she was little, her guardians told her never to talk to strangers. Up until now, she never met one, and she was scared. She slipped away from Cloud again, but she did not get far. He caught her by the wrist, stopping her.
Please don't run. I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to return something to you.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out the two items. He turned over Aerith's hand and placed the pink ribbon and the white materia in her palm. Cloud let her go and backed off, not wanting to frighten her anymore. Aerith stared down to what she believed she had lost. She looked at them with tears brimming in her eyes. She held them to her closely, closing her eyes. Cloud turned around, ready to leave, when he heard her call out,
Thank you. Thank you for returning this to me. They are very important to me.
It's really me who should be thanking you. If you didn't heal me yesterday, I could have died or something.
Aerith smiled back at him warmly. Cloud had to admit she had one pretty smile.
Are my friends okay?
Yeah, I just used sleeping materia so I could get close to you. I thought they would rip me to shreds if I tried.
They are very protective of me.
Aerith sat down on the ground and began fixing her hair. She tied the materia securely with the ribbon and began to braid her hair. Cloud watched her, unsure what to say.
Do you live here?
Yes, I live here with my aunt and uncle.
Aren't you afraid of the monsters?
No, I have everyone watching over me, and I never wander too far. You can sit down.
Cloud watched her hold her hand out to sit down. He took a place across from her and watched her finish braiding her hair.
It must be nice living out here. It seems peaceful.
And lonely. You are the first person I've met.
You're kidding.
She shook her head and frowned. She leaned over, hugged her knees to her, and rested her hand under her chin. Cloud studied her. She was definitely beautiful. Her brown hair was shiny, and her emerald eyes sparkled. She had a slender body and creamy skin without a single blemish. Aerith could feel his eyes on him. She felt her cheeks burn a little. This was the first time ever that she talked to someone around her own age. Not to mention, he was a man. A very handsome-looking man. His eyes were very beautiful.
Oh, I have been so rude. I did not even properly introduce myself. I am Aerith.
Cloud smiled. It was then it occurred to him that this girl had no idea he was a prince. This was too good to be true. This was not one of those fakes back at the castle. They only liked him for his money and title. Cloud felt the corners of his mouth twitch. He held out his hand for her to shake.
My name is Cloud.
Aerith looked at his hand for a moment, and then meekly took it. He had a firm yet gentle grip on her tiny hand. She smiled up at him, incredibly happy to have met him. Suddenly, the sound of a loud squawking ran through the trees. Aerith's head snapped up to see a golden bird tied to a tree.
What is that?
That's Choco, my chocobo. He's irritated that I didn't feed him.
Cloud got up and walked over to his pet, gently placing a hand on its beak. He pulled out some more of its food to feed it. The bird snatched it away and pecked it at it quickly.
It's magnificent.
Aerith reached out to touch the bird, but Cloud snatched her hand away. He pushed her a little ways away while placing him in between the two.
Choco isn't fond of people other than me and my brother.
The bird turned toward Cloud and Aerith. He promptly stretched out his neck and looked straight at Aerith. The young girl stared back at the bird, nervous. Cloud tried to push Choco back, but the bird was much bigger than the prince was. Choco promptly pushed Cloud aside and stood as close as it could toward Aerith.
Hi.
The bird brought its beak inches from her. Aerith shut her eyes, expecting it to hurt her, but it did not. Instead, the bird began to nuzzle against her, chirping happily, and placed a hand against its feather neck and began rubbing it.
Wow, Choco usually pecks any other person.
Aw, he's such a sweet bird.
Would you like to ride him?
Before Aerith could answer, she noticed Cait Sith and Red 13 were stirring. She looked over at Cloud and took his hand. It was time she introduced him to her friends. Cait Sith and Red 13 were skeptical of Cloud at first, but when Aerith told them he was a good person, they began to warm up to him. Cloud was a good person, and it showed, even if he was a quiet one. After chatting for a bit more, Aerith noticed the sun was descending lower. She slapped herself mentally, realizing her guardians would worry.
I have to go. I have to get back home.
I'll take you back.
No! No. I can make it back all right.
She began to run off when Cloud called out.
What about the ride on Choco?
Tomorrow, meet me at the river.
Across the vast ocean, in the highest mountain in the entire planet, sat the wicked castle of the Dark Lord, Sephiroth. His black castle radiated evil. Several shrouded figures walked up and down the castle as guards, although it did not matter. No one was foolish enough to try and climb the hazardous mountain to get inside the great northern crater where his castle dwelled. It would be suicide to try to climb it, and even if someone made it through, the guards would kill them on the spot. Down the twisty stone hallways, lit only by torches every few feet, was a throne room. Inside was a giant crystal throne with a horrific figure of some type of humanoid trapped inside. It looked like a robot or something to that nature. Seated at the top of the throne, dressed in normal black attire, a sword at his side, and his silver hair sweeping behind him, was the Dark Lord Sephiroth. His bright eyes were anything but warm and joyous. They radiated anger beyond compare, because for nearly 16 years he had been searching for the princess of the Cetra without any trace. He sent his darkest fiends to find her, but none of them could find even a hint of where she could be.
Curses.
Sephiroth cursed aloud, slamming his fist against the armrest of his throne.
It has been 16 years and still no sign of the princess. I've sent hordes of fiends to find her, and yet no child came close to her. A princess with hair like the earth, eyes like the emeralds, and a voice like the angels. My curse will be complete. I will not let them make a fool out of me.
Sephiroth held out his hand and shot 3 orbs into the air. They crashed into the ceiling, sending 3 crystals crashing to the ground. They shattered instantly, making 3 figures that had been slumbering inside awaken.
Gadaj, Yazoo, Lars, I have a mission for you, my brothers.
Yes, big brother.
Kadaj falling to one knee in a bow, the other 2 followed in his suit.
Find me the princess of the Cetra. Find her before midnight of her birthday. 3 days from now.
Sephiroth trailed off as he looked out a window to see the moon high above. Kadaj, Loz, and Yazoo, each looking very much like Sephiroth but with minor variations, all bowed. Then, without another word, they exited the throne room.